July 1881, 4 in the morning. A 16-year-old prince stands on the deck of a Royal Navy warship and watches a dead ship cross his bow. 13 men aboard HMS Bacchante saw it. A phantom vessel, glowing red, her masts, spars and sails standing out in sharp relief, 200 yards off the port bow. The officer of the watch confirmed it from the bridge. A midshipman was sent forward to the forecastle, but when he arrived, nothing. No ship, no wreckage, no wake. The night was clear, the sea was calm, and by 10:45 that morning, the ordinary seaman who spotted it first had fallen from the foretopmast crosstrees and was, in the Navy's own words, smashed to atoms. This wasn't a drunken lookout on a merchant brig. This was the Royal Navy. The witness was Prince George of Wales, the future King George V. His older brother, Prince Albert Victor, stood beside him, and the sighting wasn't whispered in a tavern. It was published in the official Admiralty log. But the Bacchante wasn't the first ship to see the Flying Dutchman, and it wasn't the last. For 400 years, sailors have reported the same vessel, in the same waters, burning the same impossible red, and in almost every case, someone aboard died shortly after. So what are they actually seeing? And why does one stretch of ocean keep producing the same ghost? To understand the Flying Dutchman, you have to understand the water that made him, and the water starts with a collision. The Cape of Good Hope sits at the bottom of Africa. It looks calm on a map, but underneath, two oceans are at war. The warm Agulhas current from the Indian Ocean, surface temperature around 24 degrees, slams head-on into the cold Benguela current from the Atlantic, running at just 14. The 10-degree collision breeds fog that arrives without warning, rogue waves that tower 30 meters, and storms so violent that the Portuguese explorer who first rounded it in the 1480s didn't call it the Cape of Good Hope. He called it the Cape of Storms. But that name was bad for business. King John II of Portugal renamed it to encourage trade. The ocean didn't care. Until the Suez Canal opened in 1869, the Cape was the only sea route between Europe and Asia. Every ship carrying spice, silk, or gold had to pass through these waters, and the seabed beneath them was already a graveyard. The numbers were staggering. Between the 1590s and the 1790s, the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, the richest corporation the world had ever seen, sent over 1,600 ships through those waters on the route from the Netherlands to Java. More than 250 never arrived. Entire crews swallowed overnight. No distress signal, no survivors washing ashore, just a ship that left one port and never reached the next. But one captain kept beating the odds. His name was Bernard Fokke, Frisian-born, VOC officer, and impossibly, unreasonably fast. In 1678, Fokke completed the voyage from the Dutch Republic to Java in 3 months and 4 days. The typical crossing took 6 to 8 months. Fokke did it in half the time. Nobody could match it. Nobody could explain it. And so his peers did what sailors have always done with things they can't explain. They decided he'd made a deal with the devil. But Fokke didn't slow down. He kept making the run, kept arriving months before anyone thought possible. The VOC loved him. Fast ships meant faster profit. His fellow captains feared him. And then, on a voyage no different from the dozens before it, Bernard Fokke vanished. His ship never made port. No wreckage, no survivors, no explanation. Just a statue the Dutch erected on a tiny island near Batavia to honor their fastest captain, and a rumor that refused to die, because the sailors who followed him through the Cape started seeing something. A ship under full sail, where no ship should be, moving too fast, burning with a light that didn't belong to any lantern. They said it was Fokke, still sailing, still racing, still bound by whatever bargain he'd struck, and they gave it a name, the Flying Dutchman. The first time the name appeared in print was 1790. A traveller named John MacDonald wrote one sentence. The weather was so stormy that the sailors said they saw the Flying Dutchman. No backstory, no curse. Just a name that every sailor on the route already knew. 5 years later, George Barrington, a convicted pickpocket being shipped to Botany Bay, recorded what happened when a boatswain shook him awake at 2 a.m, white with terror. The Flying Dutchman was coming right down upon us. With everything set, the man cried, her lower deck ports lit up as if cleared for action. No real ship could run with open gun ports in weather that rough. She would flood in minutes. But Barrington went on deck. Moonlight, empty water. He concluded the man had mistaken a dark cloud for a ship. The boatswain wasn't embarrassed. He was relieved, and Barrington noticed something that mattered more than the sighting itself. Nobody aboard questioned the name. He wrote, the supposed phantom was called the Flying Dutchman. Not a Flying Dutchman. By 1795, the legend was already standard vocabulary on every ship rounding the Cape. Then the myth started growing teeth. In 1803, a poet named John Leyden gave the ship a crime. The crew had committed some unspeakable act in the infancy of navigation. They were cursed with pestilence. No port would take them, but the crime kept changing with every retelling. So Walter Scott made it piracy. Some versions whispered the ship had carried the first enslaved people from Africa, and the ocean itself was the punishment. Each generation layered on a darker sin, as if the legend was hungry for something worse. It was Blackwood's Edinburgh Magazine in 1821 that finally gave the ghost a face. A captain, Hendrik van der Decken, a Dutch merchant vessel out of Amsterdam, trying to round the Cape in a gale. His crew begged him to turn back. The storm was killing them, but Van der Decken refused. He stood on the quarterdeck, rain hammering his face, and swore an oath to God or the devil or both. May I be eternally damned if I do, though I should beat about here till the day of judgment. Something heard him. The ship never reached port, and according to the legend, it never stopped sailing. 12 years later, Heinrich Heine added the one detail that made the legend immortal. Every 7 years, the Dutchman could step ashore to search for a woman whose faithful love might break the curse. But there was a catch. If she proved unfaithful, or if he doubted her, he'd be condemned to the sea again, and she'd be condemned with him. Richard Wagner turned that into an opera in 1843. Der Fliegende Holländer. He'd survived his own terrifying storm at sea in 1839, clinging to the rigging as waves broke across the deck. The screams of his crew became the sailors' chorus. Soprano Wilhelmine Schroeder-Devrient sang the role of Senta on opening night in Dresden. In the final act, Senta throws herself into the sea to prove her devotion. The curse breaks. Wagner's opera turned a sailor's superstition into the most famous ghost story in the world. But fame should have killed the sightings. Instead, it made them worse, because the Flying Dutchman kept appearing, not in theaters, but on open water. And now it had an audience that knew exactly what they were looking at. Here's the problem. A myth should stay in the book that created it. The Flying Dutchman should be a story, a sailor's yarn that grew in the retelling until Wagner turned it into opera and everyone moved on. Except they didn't, because independent witnesses, naval officers, princes, beachgoers, submarine crews, kept reporting the same thing, the same red glow, the same full sails on calm water, the same vanishing, not inspired by each other, not reading from the same source, reporting the same phenomenon across 4 centuries, on different ships, in different decades, under different flags. This isn't one sighting, it's a pattern, and a pattern is harder to dismiss than a ghost story. April 6th, 1821. Captain William Fitzwilliam Owen of HMS Leven was sailing near Simon's Bay at the Cape of Good Hope. His 2-ship squadron, the 20-gun Leven and the 10-gun brig sloop Barracuda, was on a 5-year mapping expedition along the African coast. That morning, Owen spotted the Barracuda roughly 2 miles away. The crew recognized faces on deck. The rigging was unmistakable. They could identify individual officers, except the real Barracuda was over 300 miles away. The Royal Navy investigated. They called it refraction, a trick of light in a fog bank. But there was a problem with that explanation. Mirages produce distorted images, warped shapes, inverted silhouettes, objects stretched until they're unrecognizable. Owen's crew didn't see a smear on the horizon. They recognized individual men. In 1835, a British merchant vessel was sailing through a storm when a second ship materialized out of the darkness, under full sail, driving straight at them. The helmsman threw the wheel hard over, but at the moment of collision, nothing. The ship was gone. No impact, no debris, no sound except the wind. Then 1881, the Bacchante. We've already been there, but it hits different now. Prince George wasn't just a teenager seeing a ghost. He was seeing the same ghost that Fokke's successors reported 2 centuries earlier, that Barrington's boatswain screamed about in 1795, that Van der Decken's curse supposedly launched. Same glow, same full sails, same calm sea, and the same death following close behind. But the 20th century should have killed the legend. Steamships had replaced sail. Radar had replaced the lookout. The age of ghost ships should have been over. It wasn't. In 1939, crowds on Glencairn Beach in South Africa watched a sailing ship drive towards shore with what one newspaper called uncanny volition. Not a distant smear on the horizon, a full-rigged vessel heading straight for the rocks, close enough to see her sails. Dozens of people saw it. The ship vanished before it touched the shore. In 1941, same beach, same ship, same vanishing. Then 1942, 4 witnesses watched a phantom vessel enter Table Bay, Cape Town, under full sail and dissolve inside the harbor. During the same war, a German U-boat crew, under Admiral Dönitz's command, logged a Flying Dutchman sighting in the submarine's official records. The fate of that U-boat remains uncertain. These weren't medieval peasants. These were trained officers, crowds of modern beachgoers, submarine crews at war. And every sighting shares 2 things: the waters around the Cape of Good Hope and atmospheric conditions that science can almost explain. Almost. There is a real phenomenon that could explain every sighting. It's called Fata Morgana. When cold air sits trapped beneath a layer of warm air, light doesn't travel in a straight line. It bends. A ship that's actually below the horizon, too far away to see, gets projected above it. A superior mirage floating in mid-air, sometimes glowing, sometimes inverted. But this isn't a shimmer on a hot road. Fata Morgana can project an image of a real vessel from dozens of miles away, complete enough to show sails, rigging, even the shape of the hull. And the Cape of Good Hope, where the warm Agulhas meets the cold Benguela, produces some of the most extreme temperature differentials on any ocean. The same water that sinks ships also bends light. The vanishing is the easiest part to explain. Fata Morgana mirages collapse the moment atmospheric conditions shift. 1 second a ship is there, the next, gone. No wake, no wreckage, just empty ocean. That covers the vanishing. It covers the geographic clustering. Almost every sighting happens near the Cape. It even explains the timing. Sightings happen on calm, clear nights, exactly the conditions that trap temperature inversions. And refracted light sometimes produces a reddish halo around the mirage, which could account for the glow that witnesses keep describing. But Fata Morgana has a problem. Fata Morgana produces distorted images, warped shapes, objects stretched vertically until they're unrecognizable. Yet Captain Owen's crew, in 1821, recognized faces at 2 miles. The Bacchante crew described precise rigging detail, masts, spars, sails, at 200 yards. These aren't the smeared shapes of a mirage. These are sharp images of a ship that isn't there. And Fata Morgana doesn't explain the consistency. Across 4 centuries, witnesses described the same vessel, the same red light, the same brig under full sail. Different decades, different oceans, different observers who never read each other's logs. Same ship. And it certainly doesn't explain the deaths. The ordinary seaman on the Bacchante fell from the foretopmast 6 hours after the sighting. Coincidence? Almost certainly. But the legend says seeing the Flying Dutchman brings doom, and the very first sighting published in a naval log delivered exactly that. There are other theories, and none of them survive contact with the evidence. Mass suggestion, except trained naval officers don't log hallucinations in Admiralty records. St. Elmo's fire, except that clings to your own rigging. It doesn't project a fully formed brig onto empty water. Misidentified vessels, except the midshipman was sent forward to investigate, and there was nothing there. Not a hull, not a sail, not a ripple. Fata Morgana is the best answer science has. It explains 90% of what witnesses describe. The vanishing, the glow, the clustering around the Cape, the calm conditions. But that last 10%, the consistency, the detail, the deaths, sits in a space where optics ends and something older begins. 400 years of the same ship. The same red light, the same calm sea. Science can explain what they saw. It just can't explain why it's always the same thing. And then there's the question nobody asks. If every sighting is a mirage of a real ship, projected from beyond the horizon, then where is the real ship? In 1881, the night was clear, the sea was calm, and no vessel was found anywhere near the Bacchante's position. The mirage theory requires a source, but in case after case, the source doesn't exist. July 11th, 1881. The red glow is gone. The ocean is calm. Prince George goes below to write in his journal. A 16-year-old prince recording what 13 men saw, and none of them could explain. The ordinary seaman, name unrecorded, rank barely noted, climbs the foretopmast for the morning watch. He's done it 100 times before. At 10:45, he falls. The ship sails on. The entry in the Admiralty log doesn't speculate. It doesn't try to explain. It records 13 men who saw a ghost and 1 man who didn't survive the day. But the words are still there. The Flying Dutchman crossed our bows, in the same log that tracks coordinates and wind speed. The Navy never retracted them. Bernard Fokke vanished sailing these waters in 1678. Hendrik van der Decken swore his oath and was never seen again. And on a calm night in 1881, a dead ship crossed the bow of a Royal Navy warship, glowing red, 200 yards away, and then was gone. The Flying Dutchman doesn't need to be real. It only needs to be seen. And for 400 years, it has been. There is always another ship that never came home. The next one is already on screen.